Hello and welcome back, and that is right, today I'm going to talk about what might be my favourite ever router that I've ever had in the studio. Now, saying my favourite ever router realistically is one of the dullest things any human has ever said, and as a side note, if you're really going to have a problem with the way I'm pronouncing the word router today, this may not be the video for you, but this is the UniFi Dream Router 7. This is their latest generation router, knocking out a surprising reported $279. Now, before we go any further, we got to talk about that price, haven't we? Because $279 is kind of one of those numbers that could, on one hand, seem extraordinarily expensive, and on another hand, be extraordinarily cheap. Why is that? Well, first and foremost, getting a router. Most users, when it comes to buying a router, you want something special. Realistically, as soon as you've got the internet pumped into your home or office environment, the internet service provider, the ISP, already lumped in a router, so why on earth are you dropping what is close to 300 nicker on a brand new router? What's in it for you? Why exactly would you go for a bespoke bare metal private router and not go for your ISP? And that's pretty much what this video is about, and why I really like this device. It ain't perfect, nothing is, and I'll talk about that more later on. But let's talk about what you get for $279. So straight away, the router you get is pretty much identical to the previous generation Wi-Fi 6 router that was rolled out by UniFi, but with numerous very small improvements internally there. Number one, this is Wi-Fi 7. Taking advantage of the 6 gigahertz band there, it means that this tri-band router at 2.45 gigahertz and 6 gigahertz has a whole host of area to play with when it comes to your connected devices. But on top of that, you can take advantage of the 20, 40, 80, 160 and 320 megahertz channel connections on this device. That means that unlike previous generations of Wi-Fi that would give you 400 megabits or 800 megabits or even in some cases 1.2 gigabit connectivity, technically higher than that of wired gigabit connectivity, this router can supply an absurd level. Indeed, when I was taking advantage of a simple USB Wi-Fi 7 adapter that I bought for 20 to 30 nicker online, I was able to have a wireless connection between my Windows PC and this at 2.8 gigabits per second. That is greater than 2.5 gig physical network interfaces there. And again, that was a 30 nicker upgrade for my Windows PC and this, but it doesn't stop there. You see, Wi-Fi 7 does bring a lot to the party, notwithstanding better bandwidth optimization there, encryption efficiency and power efficiency, but on top of that, something called MLO, multi-layer operation. What that does is allow a single device, like my Windows PC, to take advantage of multiple connections at once. Think of something like link aggregation or SMB multi-channel that on physical cables allows you to bond multiple connections between the devices and take advantage of that additional flow. MLO does that on a Wi-Fi level, and Wi-Fi 7 and the 6 gigahertz frequency and that extra space including the 5 gigahertz frequency allows you to create much bigger wireless bandwidth for Wi-Fi 7. But it's not like UniFi invented Wi-Fi 7, it's been around for a while. What makes this stand out? Wi-Fi 7 routers, generally at the moment, you can pick them up as low as 120 to 150, and those are quite basic models that generally don't have great physical connections. If you really want to throw money at the problem and take advantage of multiple 6 gigahertz streams, you want to take advantage of greater than gigabit connectivity up to 10G, you have to spend closer to 400, 500, 600 nicker. That's why this at 279 can be very attractive. But let's talk about some of the physicalities. On the front, we've got a physical LCD. You can't control it like you can do on some UniFi products. There is an output showing you the bandwidth that's going in and out of the device. On the rear, we have got some great connections. When I first heard about this device, I'll say straight away, as someone who wasn't that familiar with the previous generation router, I didn't know that they were clocking out something like this. So for a start, we have got 4 individual 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports. One of those is the WAN or LAN, you can switch it as WAN or LAN, and the other ones are dedicated LAN. But interestingly, this top one is PoE. It supplies a 15 watt power over Ethernet output there, which you can attach a camera or a PoE switch. More on that later on. Now, with all of these 2.5 gigabit Ethernet ports, it doesn't end there, because we've also got there at the bottom an SFP 10 gig input there, and that can be used as both a WAN and a LAN. That means that if you are running some phenomenal internet connections there, let's face it, greater than gigabit internet connections are now becoming a little bit more common. The result is that you can have an input there for greater than 2.5 gigabit internet speeds, and if you have that where you are, well done. But you can use that and really spread it out across the other 4 2.5s. Again, 10G for 2.5s, the same bandwidth there. Or take advantage of between gigabit and 2.5 gigabit internet speeds in the 2.5G WAN port, and the other 10G, set it up as a LAN and use that for a connected switch, use it for a connected UniFi product, take advantage of a 10G NAS. There's a huge amount you can do, again, at this $279 router. This can support up to 30 UniFi devices and well over 300 plus client devices as well, mobiles, desktop PCs, printers, all of the peripherals, all in this modest spec. Rocking out with a quad-core ARM processor, and that is an A53 and 3 gig of DDR4 memory internally. You can't upgrade it, but it's a router. I wouldn't expect it. But do you know what you may have also noticed when I was waving this around? At the bottom there, this here. I've got good and bad news. The good news is it is an SD card slot. This arrives with an SD card inside that allows you, alongside the UniFi software that we're going to talk about later on, you can take advantage of UniFi's Protect surveillance application. In fact, this runs multiple different UniFi appliances within the UniFi software there, or the UniFi controller software, the legacy name for it. That SD card isn't even just a Billy Basic any old SD card. It is a WD Purple dedicated surveillance card there. That means this card is dedicated for those heavy write operations that surveillance entails, with a lesser element towards read. Now, why did I say it's good and bad news? It's good news because they've included it and the support of Protect, which again now supports other third-party cameras as well as their own, license-free, I might add. The bad news is that it's not a 5G SIM or LTE. I really wished it was. I like having the surveillance software on board, and I like that they've included the storage. But at the same time, I would have loved this to include a SIM slot, because then you could have had the failover. They've gone for the double WAN, and I know that UniFi have played around with SIM/LTE supported router devices. I just would have loved to have seen that to be used, or at least include it as an additional option to have a SIM internet failover. So for those that were considering the previous generation router behind this, a similar price point, I think there's about $70 to $90 difference. I would say straight away, number one, this has got pure 2.5 GBE and the 10 GBE. The other one hasn't anywhere near that much broad external bandwidth. This one arrives with that SD card slot and SD included, whereas the other one does not have it in that same way. Also, that was Wi-Fi 6. This is Wi-Fi 7. This arrives with a quad-core CPU rather than the dual-core, the predecessor, and more memory. In fact, the more I dug, the only thing I could find that the previous generation device had that this doesn't is this has only got one PoE, with its predecessor has 2 PoE. In every other single way, this is a scale up from its predecessor, and moreover, it is still a banger of a router in terms of software. And on that note, moving on to the user interface here of the Dream Router 7, I'm going to have to balance things a little bit here for those that have never utilised a UniFi appliance and those that already are well deep into the ecosystem. So I'm sorry if I'm going to tell you stuff you already know, but I'll say straight away that the software and management of the Dream Router 7 is pretty sweet. It does a very good job of a single portal interface where you can manage everything right the way down to the security and encryption, but also that's on a per device basis. Also, the security and the management of individual LANs and SSIDs or Wi-Fi connections is all handled very, very well. So for example, this is the user interface here. I'm accessing it via UI.com, and keep in mind that you do not need to register with a UI.com account if you want to just utilize this router yourself. It just makes things a lot easier. And just to kind of show things along, I could have accessed this on the LAN if I wanted to on the local area network, but I'm choosing to bounce from UI.com's account just to give you a kind of realistic, real-world experience of accessing this device remotely. So straight away on the bottom, you've got some good understanding there of the different websites and services that I'm accessing via the different devices that I've got here, all the different client devices that are connected. I've got this laptop. I've also got a couple of Google Pixel old phones there that I've connected to on this device. There's also a legacy and history of different devices that have accessed this. And if I wanted to access this with a Wi-Fi 7 appliance, then what I could do straight away is go down into the appliances. Again, we'll go back into it there. Select one of these appliances here. And you can see straight away what methodology I'm using to accessing it, which part of the radio frequency I'm accessing there, the blocks, the whole works there. And straight away down there, you've got real-time information, and you can really dig pretty darn deep. So for example, if we want to there, we can name this device. We can also allow rules to basically dictate the performance, its priority of service, its quality of service, and more. And we can bind that to individual users. We can bind that to a schedule if we choose. So if we want, we can actually set it up so with a certain ruling that this device can only access this connection at a certain time of day. We can also set it up for those individual air gaps right the way down to the Wi-Fi connection itself. So for example, if we want, we'll leave that there, we could set up individual SSIDs if we want, and then from those individual SSIDs, have some of those only accessible at certain times of day, and those individual SSIDs having different security controls, different parental controls with regards to accessing certain websites, you know, restricted stuff, non-restricted, that sort of thing, business, non-business, right the way down again to the encryption protocol, and then with the scheduling there at the bottom, just choosing how and when. All lovely stuff. And unsurprisingly, a lot of this can also be extended to individual VLANs with those 4 2.5 gig ports and that 10G port. Again, setting up your own WAN or LAN protocol as you need. You can go ahead and create individual physical VLANs there that can force individual devices onto them. So for example, if a certain device connects or a device enters a certain VLAN, you can restrict, allow, disallow as you see fit. It's all lovely and well tailored within this software, but keep in mind, many, not all, but many of the features I'm going to talk about in this video aren't going to be restricted just to the Dream Router 7. A lot of them you can get in other UniFi devices, so don't think there's a feature on here that you think, well, I simply have to buy this device. There is a good chance that a lot of this you can get by going for other UniFi products, the Dream Machine system, for example, or alternatively, you can install a lot of the UniFi controller software on a third-party appliance. But it's just a lot of those control provisions you're not going to be able to use. Stuff like the topography, where you can see a real-world layout of all of the devices and how they're connected. And if you've created VLANs and you're binding and moving devices in between those VLANs, they'll all be showed here. And you can break that down, by the way, all the way down to the internet flow control, where you can see how much internet and what is controlling the bandwidth, the dominance of the bandwidth as well. And again, you can break that down to individual devices where you can remove them. Or if you want to see a device that you didn't know about has suddenly entered the fray, you can see it on this topography and then act and create rules accordingly. So again, you've got both the analytical approach and the more graphical approach at your disposal. But drilling down a little bit more into the specific router controls here, let's go straight into the Dream Router here, and on the right hand side of the screen, not only can we see a detailed layout of the ports and what's being connected to this, but on top of that we can change a lot of the port management there if we choose to. So for example, we can see an overview of those VLANs and which one of the physical binding ports we've got them connected to, insights on the upload download there, and more control information there going back into that router device. We can also break down a lot more into the radio control there. What do I mean by that? The individual Wi-Fi connections and the frequencies that we're accessing on, how much of that we can control, exactly how much channel usage there is at any given time. And you can go even further than that by digging down into the layout of the radials. So for example, here we have the radio transmission here all laid out across the local area environment and other SSIDs that may be around. Again, performance testing either using the Wi-Fi Man application or the inbuilt speed test for different client devices all accessible there. And you can bring that down even further when you look at traffic flow for the individual websites, and then from there, if you choose, you can then decide if you want to create blocks to certain websites on a case-by-case basis there. You can even break down the regional input-output there on the router in a very user-friendly fashion here to see just what is happening and where that data transmission is. So for example, we can see the percentage control up and down which regions of the world, and then if we do find out, for example, we're being pinged or a client device is accessing regions that we don't want it to, we can nail down directly on them and create regional blocking as and when we need it. Now tapping into that Wi-Fi 7 and indeed 5 and 6 support there, we can see a great deal more information about that layer and how Wi-Fi 7 is integrated across the different frequencies, bands and those individual connections. So for example, here on the 320 megahertz frequency, I have got that crossover there. There's 2 active connections there on the 320 megahertz connection there. That allows for those greater performance numbers, but of course depending on where you are in the world, you may not even be able to fully realize the majority of the 6 gigahertz band, as some regions like Great Britain right now do not support access to a lot of that. Now that's going to change over time. If you're in the US, luckily you can access a great deal more of that frequency, but do keep that in mind if you are looking at getting a Wi-Fi 7 router and you want to capitalize on the enhanced access to the 6 gigahertz frequency, it is going to be very regionally dependent. And for multiple internet connections, you do have support of that failover. We mentioned earlier on that this system can support 2 active WAN connections there on the 2.5 and the 10 GBE connection, and you can decide what you want to do with those individual connections. So for example, on the secondary WAN, that 10 GBE connection, not only can you obviously choose whether you want it to be a LAN or a WAN, but you can choose what exactly happens in the event of a failover. Do you want to have them distributed with taking advantage of 2 active connections, or one as a safety net for the other? VPN control is pretty diverse on this device, with supporting numerous third-party VPN services, as well as their own Wi-Fi man and teleport access point and site-to-site VPNs, SD-WAN, etc., all manageable within this application on this router, which, given the price point of this system, some of these, I'm not going to call them enterprise appliances, but I'm going to say they're larger business appliances. And when you go into the security protocols there, notwithstanding auto protect, regional blocking, honeypot protection, that kind of stuff all built in. An intrusion prevention protocol allows you to have an adaptive system for when these events happen. And again, content filtering for the more basic setup and forget home utilization is all built in. Automated routing protocol, automated traffic control, port forwarding and stuff like that, some of which are domestic and easily available, and others far more business focused are all built in here. And with individual user creation and profiles, you can adapt to individual connections, individual SSIDs. All of this is incredibly diverse and a lot to dig into, but again, it is not mandatory. It's how much you want to have access to now or later that really is the true benefit here. And if you are of a mind to get your hands dirty, again, it's all here to play with, notwithstanding things like SSH access there. On top of that, if you go into the Profiles tab here, have a look in the system afterwards, not only can you go ahead and whether you're a professional installer, and therefore you can open up some of the locked elements of this system that have been locked, obviously for security measures, but within the control plane you do have a decent amount of control and access all the way built in from the ground up. Whether it is that you are a system integrator that's looking to scale up a business Wi-Fi and network connection and you want to kind of tighten some of those security measures, or you're just looking for Billy basic control. There's a lot to play with here, there's a lot to like, and ultimately when it comes to this router software, you know, 2/3 of this is just general UniFi development on that software platform, and some of them are just integrations thanks to that Wi-Fi 7 utilization that have really scaled things up. This whole review comes down to what I said at the start of the video, and that is $279. I hate to bang on about money the whole time, but it's important because there are going to be people that have spent years with their ISP router that they include with their services and gone, why should I spend nearly 300 SOVs on upgrading or replacing something I've already got? And it's about the feature set, it's about the scalability towards that surveillance platform, it's the enhanced bandwidth there on the rear, and not only taking advantage of greater internet connectivity going into your home or office, but better management and control in terms of security and packet management that this router provides on the internal network space. $279 for what you are getting is a phenomenal deal. Is it the best router in the market? No. I do think there is scalability to be done here, and I wish they made a more enterprisey version of this that had more PoE on it, perhaps the LTE SIM failover there that I mentioned earlier on, or external antennae. But you can still get around that by taking advantage of things like UniFi's U7 Pro mesh access points there. You've also got the U7 Express as well. There are options and scales out there, but they of course have additional pricing where I think some users would probably like that bundled in. Also the fact that this can be utilized instead of a UniFi Dream Machine in many ways to not only have a router, but now also have a UniFi based entry point. And from there, manage surveillance, manage network connections, manage multiple SSIDs, manage VLANs, manage the entire network by device, by profile. It's hard to fault. And ultimately, that's why this is the best router I've had in this studio this whole time. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. There is a link in the description where you can get a hold of one of these yourselves over on UniFi. Realistically, stock levels from them is always going to be a joke. For some reason, they just really are not great at managing stock. So there's a link down there if you are interested in getting one yourself. And keep in mind that using that link will result in a small commission coming to me and Eddie here at NAS Compares. It allows us to keep doing what we do. But apart from that, there's also a written review below. We've gone into a little bit more detail about the testing, and we're going to be revisiting this and comparing it against its predecessor more directly soon. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.